Hello. Hi, I am Reverend Ryan Pulley, and we are Soul Evolution Collaborative. And this is Strip Down Sunday, where we unchurch your Sunday experience. So, welcome. We're thrilled to have you here and have this time with you and to hopefully offer some inspiration and spiritual upliftment and hopefully a new take in our own unique Soul Evolution Collaborative way. And so we have stripped down your Sunday morning to offer you this streamlined experience that hopefully fits your needs. And we have this strong desire to bring this message to the world in a time that I think we can all agree we need it the most. And so Soul Evolution Collaborative is dedicated to not only personal transformation, but communal evolution. So just a few quick little things before we dive into this subject today of forgive to live. So first, everything that you want to know about Soul Evolution Collaborative, if you've never heard of us before, even if you have, you can find all this information on our website at soulevolutioncollaborative.org. You can hop on over there. I'll put the link in the chat, and feel free to open up another tab and maybe explore even during this time to see everything that we have to offer, all the programming that we have to offer, and also some ways to get involved in our community. And so it's communities like ours, with missions like ours, that bring change to the world. And so we are trying to actively create this new earth, actively creating a world that truly works for everyone. And so if you are in any way in alignment with our mission and our goal and would like to support us in any way, you can go to soulevolutioncollaborative.org and click on the donate button and partner with us in this amazing journey thus far. All right, so here we go. Forgive to live. This is the topic for today. And so I'll have to admit, this is one of these really heavy topics that I didn't know really where to start because it's so loaded. There's so many things, so many nuances, so many kind of old ideas, old ways of thinking about forgiveness that maybe need to be replaced. And so it's a little bit more work that we can do in this kind of small period of time, but hopefully I can at least begin the conversation, begin the shift in looking at the subject. And so I kind of like stopped and started and rewrote this and rewrote notes and erased it and all that good stuff, procrastinated, paced, and then like a million other things other than really focusing on this topic this week because it's really challenging. But I am in it to win it, as I say. So here's my best attempt at like starting this new conversation around forgiveness. And honestly, I wish we had a different word because for me, this word of forgiveness, and maybe for you too, it has a lot of baggage that comes with it. And it's often this baggage of expectations that have been heaped on us from others. And you know what? Often from spiritual communities. And I read about a bazillion quotes and articles about forgiveness, and nothing really seemed to land. It all seemed like this kind of old idea, kind of bypassy sort of understanding of forgiveness, except maybe this one. And so this is from an unknown author, and it says, sometimes the first step to forgiveness is understanding that the other person is a complete idiot. Now, I put that in there as a joke, obviously, and this kind of sounds like something I would say, but it just speaks to this idea that there's so many different views of forgiveness in this conversation. And I think often it's understood, and I think often these old ideas of what forgiveness should look like can often alienate and isolate us, and often maybe invalidate our own experience. And so our goal is not to do that. Our goal is to take a deeper dive, maybe another angle look at forgiveness. And so I think that we've understood, and when I say we, I mean most of us, have seen forgiveness or have been taught that forgiveness is this prescriptive activity that offers freedom on the other side if we do it right and if we do it often enough. And so often we've been told that it's something we have to do if we want to be happy or healthy or spiritual, fill in the blank. It's this understanding that I think can often be damaging and can really bypass our emotions, can bypass our experiences and make us feel isolated. And so this old idea of forgiveness can be a little too prescriptive, at least it can be for me. That forgiveness, or this feeling, this energy behind it, whatever word that you want to call it, um, is not a singular action. It's not something that we check off our to-do list and say, I've forgiven you, all's good, let's go on. I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. And I think that we have been fed this idea of forgiveness that often is impossible to come by without this kind of deeper look, this other side of this idea of forgiveness. And so for me, as I thought about the experiences in my own life and the own struggles that I've had to forgive, or the own experiences or own events that have created really deep rooted sort of hurts, really ingrained in me, and I've lived from that space for quite some time. As I began to look at these hurts and these feelings, this old idea of forgiveness really just doesn't work for me. It just doesn't show up that way for me. It doesn't show up as a singular action and then all's good. And I would beg to think that it probably doesn't show up that way for a lot of folks. And so for me, this idea of forgiveness brings about this kind of visual. And maybe this is not a new idea per se, but it's kind of a new idea in my own experience with this language of forgiveness. That forgiveness is less this singular action or this thing that we do, and is more this kind of intentional, fluid activity. And so it's not like a one-size-fits-all process, a formula that we plug in, we do this, and it equals forgiveness. But instead, it outpictures in as numerous ways as we are, in as many ways as there are beings on the planet, that it's not this one size fits all, let's do it this right way and that's the only way. But in essence, this energy is really the very activity of life itself. It is a way of moving about our world. It's a way of, as I call it, continually evaluating the stuff that's in our bag. And so for me, this visual bag really works because it has this kind of feeling of heaviness or lightness. And so I can resonate with that because I feel that in my body. I feel that in my body when I am open to new ideas, and I feel it in my body when I'm holding on to old stories. And so for me, this idea of a bag is a good visual. For others, it may be a closet or maybe just a myriad of other things. But for me, let's go with the bag for the purpose of our conversation today. And so it's a way, it's just this constant intentional activity of really evaluating the stuff that we've packed in our bag. And this may be stuff of old ideas. This may be stuff of events that have happened to us. These may be the stuff of interactions that we've had with others. This may be the stuff of how we have wanted to show up and maybe miss the mark a little bit. So all these create little stones, if you will, in our bag. And so this idea, this fluidity of this understanding of forgiveness, or for me, integration kind of works better as a word for me. This idea of integration of those events in my experience is this constant evaluation and looking at what I have in my bag. And sometimes I have to sit down and dump my bag out and look at everything I got in it. If I'm feeling extra adventurous and really picking up those things that serve me, those things that I want to hold on to, and maybe I'm not ready to move past yet, and that's okay. And that's kind of a new understanding of this idea of forgiveness, because we're not always at a point where we can let go of certain things. And as we know more, as we learn more, we become more aware of the things that we can let go of and the things that maybe we need to hold on for a little bit. Maybe they're teaching us something in this moment. But this idea, this fluid activity of forgiveness is this evaluation. And it's taking out the things that no longer serve us and packing up everything that does and continuing our journey. And then on another day doing the same thing over and over again. Because what we know is the experiences of our lives, whether we label them as good or we label them as bad, these experiences are energetic cords to ourselves. And so this idea of forgiveness, or this idea of integration, as I like to call it, is evaluating those cords, evaluating those energetic cords, evaluating those links and connections to those experiences. And in some instances, being able to loosen that stronghold. And that's easier said than done. And I think that this is a life work. This is a life process. This is a life evaluation of unpacking and repacking. And so I know that this may sound simplistic, and maybe it is, but I think, if we can look at forgiveness in this kind of a more loose feel, we can have a lot more grace for ourselves, and maybe others too, and maybe grace for those experiences in our lives. And we begin to see that forgiveness or integration is not a set formula, but instead it has this kind of flow and evolving nature, kind of like life ourselves, that it becomes reflective of this, what we know to be true of this universal presence, this in-breath and out-breath. And so forgiveness becomes that. It becomes just the very activity of the universe, this very reciprocal nature, the in and the out. And so our work, or adventure, if you want to call it that, is to become more aware of the flow and any rocks that may be blocking our experience, and to continually reevaluate, revisit, revise, reclaim, and renew. And so this activity of forgiveness, and I know this word again, and we really need to figure out another word, but like I said, integration works for me, becomes really this outpicturing of our lives. It becomes this outpicturing of our inner work. So it's not a singular action or thought or decision, but it really is the result, the outpicturing of nurturing our own inner landscape, and in whatever way that looks like, whatever way serves us. And it's so different, it's so unique to each and every one of us. But as we begin to turn inward and nurture that inner landscape and become curious and become vulnerable and become authentic with ourselves, what begins to rise to the surface are those things that we're holding on to, those things that may have served us in the past, and now we're ready to move in a different direction. And so it becomes outpictured as we begin to work on those things, evaluate those things, put attention to those things. Then our life begins to shift on the outside. And so forgiveness and integration becomes just the natural byproduct of this inner attention. So it's not this swoop down of forgiveness and all is right in an instant, but instead it's this gentle flow of truth on the outside that begins with us on the inside. And there's no one way that this looks, and there's no one deciding moment where we have it and we've mastered it and our life begins to, but instead our life begins to reflect this and starts and stops. Isn't that how life is? Isn't that how evolution and transformation is? The starts and the stops. And that's okay. And so for me, a really important aspect of this conversation that I think is overlooked. I think it's overlooked just societally. And I think, unfortunately, it's overlooked in spiritual communities. And I think maybe this is honestly where this journey of forgiveness and integration begins, with the attention to our own inner landscape and this conversation around grief. Because I think that grief is a companion or a partner, if you will, in this conversation of forgiveness. And honestly, I think that addressing this idea of grief maybe is the first step. Maybe we overemphasize this idea of forgiveness or integration, and we kind of shove grief under the rug. And so we often forget to highlight the grief, the intense grief and feelings of loss that can be felt in this process. Grief in these situations or people's or events or interactions that didn't show up how we thought they would. And so that's when you look at these experiences, or where we have to let go of, or we look at letting go of some of the strongholds that these things have, there is, on the flip side, the loss of what could have been, or what should have been, or what we thought things would look like. And so then we're at a crossroads. We're at a crossroads of balancing these feelings of grief and loss, and this need to move forward in ways that serve us. And so often overlooked is this importance of being able to voice this grief, not to bypass it, not to play into this all is forgiven, all is wonderful type of thinking, but to be seen and to do the same for others. And so the purpose in community, the purpose in communities like this, the purpose of communities all around the world, whether it's spiritual or whether it's social or familiar, these communities, this group experience is to see and to be seen, to witness the loss, to witness the grief, to witness the emotions that come from things not going the way we thought they would. And so grief becomes a partner in this understanding of forgiveness. Sometimes a partner we'd often like to forget or bypass or not pay a lot of attention to because it's painful. There's discomfort in looking at those emotions. There's discomfort in the disappointment. But I think in looking at those things and being able to sit with our feeling, our emotions, being able to show up in our disappointment, to be able to sit with others in those feelings, to show up authentically to life in those feelings, we invite others to do the same. And when we do this, healing and integration and connection can be birthed. And I think that is where the start of this process begins. It begins not in invalidating our experience, but it begins in validating. It begins in expressing that emotion. It begins in witnessing that emotion. It begins in saying, I wish it had been different and this really sucks. And being okay with that. And when we have the freedom to show up that way, when we have the freedom not to have to show up in our communities all put together, then we can look at those things, those hurts, those things that are really deep and ingrained in our experience, and begin to put the healing balm of love and joy and connection and community on those things. And then that inner work becomes outpictured in our experience. Having the healing journey of having our grief witnessed, not only by our own selves, but by others as well. And so therefore there's freedom in that process and the peace in being witnessed. You know, I heard a recent podcast talking about grief and talking about forgiveness. And the author said that sometimes forgiveness becomes learning to live with the unacceptable, learning to integrate these stories of things not going the way we thought they would, us not being treated the way we should be treated, all those little things, those experiences, and learning and validating those experiences, and learning to sit with the discomfort and the grief and the loss and the unacceptability of those experiences, and being allowed to work through those, and then moving forward in a way that is healing, in a way that is integrating those experiences into the truth of our lives, the truth that we are present in this wholeness. We are present in this universal understanding of our experience, that the totality of the universe is made up of these experiences, and the healing that can come when those experiences are witnessed for what they are and for the challenges they bring. So for me, this topic of forgiveness brings more questions than answers. And maybe that's the whole point.